Christmas Eve this past year when a grandma sent me an email on Christmas Eve morning saying that her bottles never got delivered, and then calls me on the phone that her grandkids didn't get their, like, aren't going to have their bottles in time. And finishing up Christmas Eve with my family at like 5 o'clock because the family comes before everything, but then driving four hours northwest to deliver bottles at 9, 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve night, to drive 4 hours back and get home at 2 a.m. to then watch your little brother wake up and open presents at 6 a.m. That's love. Like, that was love for our community, that I wanted to do that. And I know other people have great stories like that. But to me, that's what brings it all together.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We are here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I want to have some honest and real conversations with real people about business. And I have a good one today. I was connected to my next guest through a good friend, Dr. Trish Berg, who was recently on the show around March, and she was talking a lot about resiliency, and it's a great episode that you should definitely check out. But after that, we were sharing stories, and she regaled me of this tale of one of her former students who, while still studying, decided to start his own business and platform that business into ways to help, build wells in third world countries and all these other ambitious things. And I said, well, I need to meet this person. I need to have this person on my show. And so she helped me make that happen. And that person in that story is Joe Knopp, and the company is called Ripple. And he's here with me today. Welcome to the show, Joe. How's it going?
Thank you, Jeff. I'm so happy to be here and be able to share our story and maybe some insights that'll help bring value to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I kind of gave only the very surface level thing, and I want to dive into that in a little bit. But, I always want to start with a little bit about you. And I really want to know what your passion lies in, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a little farm town called East Canton, Ohio, where I joke and say there's more chickens, cows than people. And I really think there is. But even just at the core of that, it was always helping people. It was, you knew your neighbors growing up. You went down the road and you helped move something on a tractor or whatever it was. And then that's just kind of grown out to this next, I call it another ripple ring of my life into the business. But at the core is, I've just grown up in a small town and love helping people.
That's awesome. And not a question I've ever asked on this podcast, but how old are you, Joe?
So I am 21 years old, and I just turned 21, I would say like eight months ago. But I started the business more than 2 years ago. So when I was first taking meetings with people, they'd say, "Oh, you want to grab a beer and like talk over some things?" I get a pop because I can't get a beer yet, but I am a little young.
No, I appreciate you answering that question because I think the context is important. It's not trying to call you out, but I think it's incredible. It's an amazing part of what your story is. And can you kind of share a little about Ripple for everybody, just so they know what that's all about?
Absolutely. So, growing up, I was doing lemonade stands, shoveling driveways. I had this entrepreneurship bug in me. And I got to college and I hadn't started a real business yet, or at least not my eyes. And so I laid in my bed thinking of what problems were out there in the world that I could solve. And my mom always told me growing up, drink your water before getting up from the dinner table, because there's kids that don't have that luxury. And so I started thinking, talked to my roommate, whose name's Chip. And I was like, "Chip, like, you think I could solve the world water crisis?" And he goes, "No, Joe, you're crazy. Somebody else would have already done it by now. Like, Bill Gates is working on this problem." And I'm like, don't tell me I can't do something. And so next thing you know, I'm researching, figure out we can build a well for about $8,000. Don't want to start a nonprofit initially and just ask people for money. I wanted there to be an equal exchange of value. So researched, found bottles similar to Yeti and Hydro flasks that were wholesaling for about $6 or $7, selling for 40, 45, 50. And then decided to spend all my money I had from an internship on those bottles, labeled them under Ripple, and we've grown the company ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a little bit, and I'm just gonna like help you plug a little bit because I mean I have my Ripple right here. Talk a little bit about what's on the other side of the Ripple logo here on the bottle.
Yeah. So on the back side of the bottle is the village name and coordinates that specific bottle supports. So every 2,000 Ripple bottles we sell, we actually build a well over in a low income country. Right now, we're primarily in Uganda. In the last 18 months, we've drilled 20 wells, giving 50,000 people access to clean water, including the first ever modern solar powered well for a remote village in the country.
That is awesome. And I love that, you had a vision, you had an idea, and you just, you stepped into it. And I remember at your age, I don't think I was in that headspace. So like what drives you? Like what kind of makes you want to push forward in these things that other people say are impossible or crazy?
Yeah. I, I mean, I didn't have the best childhood growing up. I think one of the biggest touch points that I would lean on is in 7th grade, I had a really bad concussion, where I actually developed apraxia. I lost all fine motor motions on the left side of my body. I couldn't walk, couldn't talk for months on end, and I would have to sit in front of a mirror with my grandma, moving my jaw up and down to try and form words again. And ever since then, like I've always appreciated the little things. So whether it's just being able to talk with you right now, or like my left side of my body working so I can walk after this, and then that's just grown into an appreciation for like just other human beings in general and being able to help them, just simply help them with whatever they need and however I can help.
I love that, man. That's really inspirational for sure. Um, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and you have what I would kind of consider the classic kind of old guard of business. There's business that have been running for generations, essentially, and large businesses. Um, and there's even not so old businesses, but they're still being like run um, by CEOs and bosses and leadership and management of a different generation. And I think there's a lot of conversation around this. There's like millennials and Gen Z and all these things always mixed into all the business conversations. Um, what's your general take on that? As someone from your perspective, how do you see your kind of from your perspective all those factors out in the world, but also your own role?
Yeah. So I think with Gen Z and somewhat millennials, we're very kind, compassionate, just tons of love. And I think that's met with some of the older generations being more numbers, data driven approaches like, did you get the job done? Did you meet the sales quota? And I think that something that I've leaned into is having mentors within my own life, that somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I've kind of put together my own personal life board of mentors. But I do believe the intergenerational gap is a huge piece, because you can take the older generation of, well, you do have to hit this metric, but also the approach of the younger individuals who come at it with more kindness and compassion. I think for something like we're building, is it's led with love, but it's met with accountability and humility. That I'm 21 years old. I don't know how to run a company perfectly. I think you ask the CEO of Coca-Cola, he also doesn't know how to run the company perfectly. I think because the way the times have changed, even the Coca-Cola CEO, I don't actually mean the Coca-Cola CEO, just a Fortune 500 CEO. I'm not calling out the big guy. But talking, understanding our generation and how it plays, back and forth, I think that's going to be key to a business's growth over time.
Yeah.
Um, Even companies that are younger, towards younger audiences. I want to talk about Hydro Flask real quick. Hydro Flask was started by 25, 30-year olds with just an idea to make a really great bottle. And they did fantastic. They built a community around it. They were huge on Instagram and Visco, right when it all started. But then that they sold off to the 60, 70-year-old conglomerate Helen of Troy, and they lost that personal touch and personal feel. And that's where there's got to be the balance. It can't just be black and white.
Hmm. I think one thing that is like kind of iconically different when I look out in the world between, you know, businesses owned or operated by different generations is just around just general leadership approaches. And you mentioned it, kind of like what we find to be important, what we kind of focus on. As you're starting your own journey and you're doing your own thing here, you're kind of thrust into that role, right? Whether you like it or not. I mean, you have to represent this entire business, or you have to deal with a larger employee headcount and more kind of client conversations, complications and things like that. And you started with just wanting to help get water to people. You didn't necessarily sign up for a leadership, experience. So what's that like for you? What's leadership mean to you right now?
Yeah, to me, leadership means taking away fear for your people. At this point, to me, leadership also means directing the ship and making those tough decisions that you don't want to make. Um, to be honest and just forthcoming, I when I had to fire my first employee, I went home and I cried like a baby. Like I hated it. I was like, this is somebody I was so close to, and like I just had to let them go because they weren't meeting the expectations of the business. And it had been three, four, five instances where we had conversations, and it just the mission is so much bigger than myself, so much bigger than anybody on the team that when you're put in a leadership role, I, the organization comes before like personal decisions, and that's something I've learned the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what does kind of love and humanity and compassion look like to you in terms of business? What is love as a business strategy for you?
It's not being a water bottle company. It's being a community who just happens to support us through buying a water bottle. It's Christmas Eve this past year when a grandma sent me an email on Christmas Eve morning saying that her bottles never got delivered, and then calls me on the phone that her grandkids didn't get their like aren't going to have their bottles in time. And finishing up Christmas Eve with my family at like 5 o'clock because the family comes before everything, but then driving 4 hours northwest to deliver bottles at 9, 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve night, to drive 4 hours back and get home at 2 a.m. to then watch your little brother wake up and open presents at 6 a.m. Like that to me is love as a business strategy. Is you do the tasks that are unscalable in my eyes, and something like that where the founder CEO drives 4 hours on Christmas Eve isn't scalable because I could really only do that to one person. But that's love. Like that was love for our community that I wanted to do that, and I know other people have great stories like that, but to me that's what brings it all together.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I know you also you mentioned, y- there's a lot of love in the mission itself. But a lot of times I'm also curious about the love that's necessary, I guess, within the few or many people that you work with across like within that are on board for the mission. Because you mentioned you had to fire somebody. That's tough. And I think,
Yeah.
love as business strategy gets a bad rap because it's kind of pictured as this utopian world where nobody's fired and nobody's in trouble and everybody's just, but that's also never the case. So what about love, away from the mission and the product, but also about for people around?
Yeah, I mean, our team is a family. I didn't know at least 4 out of the 6 of them before starting Ripple, but I'm telling you what, if they called and said they needed anything, like, I'm there, and the same goes for them. Like, we've we've grown into this tight family unit, and I believe that's what's led to a majority of our success is I really believe all 6 of us could step into the CEO role because we all know the business that well, and, like, we all care about each other, where if I'm like, "Guys, I gotta go take care of my mom for 2 weeks," like, every person would have enough love for me to be able to step up in that role. Um, but yeah, when we see each other outside of work, we call, we check in with each other. I joke around that unless you're one of these 6 people on my team, you don't get to talk to me between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. every day, for the most part. But like, because they're the family line, they're the speed dial.
I love it. I love it. Have you it's complete tangent, but have
Yeah.
you visited these, like, how do these wells get built? Like, how have you been there? Are you supervising that, or are you like what's that process like?
Yeah, so originally we were supposed to partner with a different nonprofit, but this was the middle of COVID when I decided to start this all, and they didn't have people on the ground in what would have been Malawi, and so I was like, "Well, shoot, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm ready to go over there. Like, I got to see this well." And so over the course of 3 months, I networked with an alumni of my university. His name is Michael Balumba, and he's a Ugandan citizen who already had an organization on the ground that was teaching uh, poverty-stricken communities like income-producing skills. And so me and him worked back and forth with contractors and engineers in Uganda to figure out what solution is going to be best for the actual community. And so that's how we came up with the first ever modern solar-powered well for a community in the country. And then him and his team led the conversations for that first well. I got to go over there, see it. We ended up running water lines into 2 different elementary schools because of the way we set up the well. It was humbly, it was freaking awesome. I was just seeing these kids' faces and knowing that their kids and kids' kids for generations to come are going to have clean water. Like it blows my mind that I was just some 20-year-old kid in a dorm room. But now we have this whole big long process of there's applications that we receive from communities all over the country. They'll come in, get screened. We'll have team members. We got a team of 10 on the ground in Uganda that's led by Michael. They'll work with these communities. Then we'll decide who gets one, sell the bottles. Bottles gets us the money. We start drilling. And then from there, there's a maintenance process that's decided upon by the community where they'll implement tax infrastructure. So it's X amount of shillings. I believe 75 shillings are about a couple dollars or like $1 or $2 per household each month. But something amazing that's happened beyond water is the first community we supported, Katiti, has used some of that money to run electricity in their community where there was no electricity before. And that truly is the ripple effect. I mean, girls are going to school because they don't have to collect water. They're running electricity because they were able to put a tax infrastructure in place. I mean, I get all jazzed up. I could go on and on about it.
I love it. I can sense your excitement. I'm getting excited. That's an amazing thing to be able to do and provide. What's next? I mean, what's next for Ripple and what's next for you? Like, what's up? What are you looking forward to?
That is a loaded question because there's so much. So right now there's the bottles that are building wells. We've got like hats and hoodies for us to build a vocational school over there where it's actually going to teach them skills. And then we also have stickers that are helping create reusable menstrual pads because I'm absolutely huge on menstrual equity. I went over there and to see the disparity between young men and young girls, it was pretty alarming. So we're working on that outside of Ripple or even within Ripple. We're also expanding into what we call our We Build a Well program. We'll partner with universities to have cohorts of 10 students at each university work over the course of a school year to get their hands dirty, run their own business, and hopefully sell 2,000 Ripple bottles and build their own well. There's a whole bunch of activities along with that and educational programming, but that's something that's coming up. Outside of Ripple, I am a part of a team called Free Period Project that's aimed at solving menstrual equity, where ads pay for the free distribution of tampons and pads. And then just another little passion project is I'm starting to import honey from Uganda called Her Honey. It's made at a little farm that supports women, children, and the disabled. And so I've got that about to launch here in the next coming months.
Man,
We'll call that it for now.
I love it. And yeah, I mean, I'm fighting feelings of my own inadequacy right now because, you know, I've
No,
helped I've helped like my neighbor one time, maybe, donated a little money here and there, but you're doing such amazing things, Joe. Like I love the passion, the drive you have to like do such incredible things in so many different ways.
Thank you. I just want to like get it out there. This is not for me to stand on like a higher shelf and look down on people. This is more of how can how can I help raise other people? Like I like the saying, "Rising tide lifts all ships." So
Hmm.
maybe if somebody hears this, they want to go start their own version of Ripple, like a Tom's model with the shoes, because that's honestly what inspired me. And that, like that's what this all is all about: is how can we lift up as many people as possible during our lifetimes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm inspired. Definitely. I know many others are along the way. So yeah, just amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. What I guess what is kind of your, message, I guess, out to those who are coming up younger than you or similar space of you, or even the older generation that's listening. Like what's your message for them?
Yeah, I think it goes along Nike's mantra of just do it. Like you're going to fail and just fail fast. Just do it. Get out there in the world, get your hands dirty, figure out what you like, what you don't like. Um, that would be my biggest piece of advice is when you start, just sometimes it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Sometimes it's even 3 steps forward and 4 steps back. But the fact that you're moving, like it's I don't know how to describe it in a I'm still getting there. But Newton's laws of motion, where every action has an opposite and equal reaction. But if you have no action, there is no opposite or like equal reaction. So you just have to move. You just have to start. Whether you're 50, 40, 60, 70, 10, 12, like start with you. I mean, Alex's lemonade is a huge example. Like raising money for pediatric cancer research. I don't know how old she was when she started that, but it doesn't matter if you're young, old. I mean, Colonel Sanders starting KFC, like whatever it might be, just start.
I love it, Joe. How and people who want to follow your journey and support, what's the website? How can they get involved? Where should they go?
Yeah, so it's wearetheripple.com, or I post a lot of my own content on LinkedIn. It's Joe Knopp, under Ripple.
Nice. Awesome. Um, Joe, been a pleasure. It's been an absolute just a joy hearing your enthusiasm, your energy for all this. Uh, Much needed for me to hear. I hope everybody enjoyed that time with you too. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. And to our audience, always appreciate the time you take to listen. And if you have not yet, we'll put those in the show notes. We'll put the website and the links for Joe. And also, as always, please check out our book, Love is a Business Strategy. Still out there, still banging. And hopefully you're subscribing, rating our podcast, and telling a friend. So with that, we will see everybody next week.